Right, let's get to St James's Park then, where Newcastle moved above Manchester United with a 1-0 win as Erik Ten Hag's side fell to a 6th league defeat of the season. And Charlotte, I'm going to start with you. Do you feel it was as one-sided a 1-0 result as you've ever seen?
Yeah, I think maybe one of the only positives for Ten Hag's side was that they went in and it was goalless at half-time because, like you said, they were absolutely battered by Newcastle. I think it was quite alarming, really, the gulfing class between the two sides. If you go back to the League Cup final, where obviously Manchester United won, I think the two teams have played each other 3 times and Newcastle have emerged victorious on all 3 of those occasions since then. These are 2 teams that obviously are going to be vying for those Champions League spots. And if you look at the, as I say, the gulfing class really between the 2 teams, not just technically, but I think as well, there didn't seem to be that passion, that desire from Manchester United. And I think we saw Erik Ten Hag cut a very frustrated figure on the touchline. And if you're watching your team play that sort of football, then there's no wonder he was throwing his arms up in frustration. So, yeah, I think it was a really, really bad day for them. But Newcastle were fully deserving of their victory yesterday.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about Ten Hag. He did look frustrated, and in particular at Anthony Martial and Marcus Rashford. What's going on with Rashford, do you feel, at the moment? It didn't look a happy figure, did he?
No, I think it's a topic that we've had to discuss all season, isn't it? I think if you go back to last season, or even the season before last, he had those niggling injury problems. Everyone was saying it's not working out at Manchester United. And then he came back, he had a full pre-season. And last season, he was absolutely fantastic. I think he hit the heights that everyone was expecting him to. And then we've come to this season and he just seems to have dropped off again. And it is a confidence thing with him. Definitely, he said that before in the past. And when he's struggling for confidence, he just really seems to not be able to fit into this team. But if you look at Manchester United as an their attacking output, what is it exactly that they're trying to do? I think a lot of it, they're relying on individual moments of brilliance. If you go back to the game against Everton were slightly unlucky in times not to go in level at that. We saw that amazing goal by Alexander Garnacho. We saw another great goal by Bruno Fernandes. But we don't really see those fantastic team goals where they can all link up together. And if someone like Rashford is suffering with confidence, he's not going to be able to get that himself. So I think he's affected by the way the team is attacking as a whole as well.
Yeah, what Charlotte's saying is really right, isn't it? It feels like it's a bunch of individuals on the park. Is that what you witnessed yesterday? And in terms of Rashford, what do you think's going on there?
Well, it's interesting because Arsenal have a similar problem in terms of their forwards scoring goals. You haven't got. We'll talk a bit more about Arsenal a bit later on, but defensively they're so good that it takes the pressure off the problems they have at the other end of the pitch, whereas United's porous defence, and they seem to concede in every game, even when they're playing against sides in the lower reaches of the table.
But actually the defence yesterday were not too bad. It was certainly central defence. Maguire had a great game.
Well, in theory, yeah, but essentially they still conceded a goal that they could have prevented. Why did they concede that goal? Because on each fullback they were poor. And Dalot, for example, and Fernandes, they weren't able to track the runs of Gordon. And behind him, Livramento, who was outstanding. And then on the other side, Trippier, and who's on the other side in front of Trippier, who was able to have the run of that side. It was Almiron who was able to put balls in at will. And United just weren't in control of either flank. And in the end, that's where the goal came from, because the ball comes in from the right side, is tucked away on the left-hand side. And I just think that United don't provide a defensive platform for their offensive players to do what they do best. OK, 1 or 2 of them have been consistently disappointing, but Rashford, we know, can produce better because last season he had a great campaign. So you have to then look at the reasons why that's happening. And I don't think it's necessarily... People were getting ahead of themselves 2 summers ago and they were saying, oh, I'd sell him to PSG and I'd sell him here and there. There's a good player there, and I think United regret it if they don't do what they can to get the best out of him.
So, Charlotte, is it a lack of strong characters, do you think, in that squad?
I think that's been one of the things that's been levelled at them, hasn't it? And you can go through the squad and you can say, where are your leaders? And I think the telling thing yesterday was once they went behind, everyone's heads just dropped. So Bruno Fernandes has come in for a lot of stick. People believe that he's not the right man to be wearing the armband at Manchester United. I personally think he seems to have calmed down a bit maybe in the last few weeks in terms of the constant berating and the whining of the referee that we see all the time that I think rubs people up the wrong way seems to have calmed down a little bit. But we're comparing it, going back to what they're saying, where's the Roy Keane of the team, that sort of thing. Where's your Gary Neville? Where are these strong leaders? But if you look across the Premier League as a whole, how many of them can we... Where are they? The game has changed now, hasn't it? And I don't think that the sort of person that we're saying that Manchester United need, I don't not think it's not in their squad. I'm not sure it's necessarily a thing anymore. I think it's a more of an individual game now. I'm not saying that they're not working as a team together, but to have that real leadership, I think Bruno Fernandes, is he the right man to do that? If you say no, who are you giving it to? Scott McTominay? He's probably one of the only ones where the Manchester United fans think that he shows the fight, but a lot of them believe that he actually isn't the calibre of being a proper starting 11 all the time.
Harry Maguire.
Exactly, and it's taken off Harry Maguire. So then where do you go with that? People might have said David De Gea. He's obviously left. He's not there anymore. You've got Marcus Rashford, who's struggling with his own form. I don't think he could carry the burden of the armband. You go through that team. I'm not really too sure. It's all well and good of saying that Bruno Fernandes isn't a good enough captain, but who else would you give it to? And I think that's a problem that stems across the whole team. And they say they all need to take responsibility. But where is that happening? I don't think we're seeing that.
What are the papers saying, Darren?
Well, the focus is all on Newcastle on the back pages. I want to show you this. Flash Gordon is the headline. I feel almost as if I need to explain who Flash Gordon was. But
Yeah, you do for me.
Oh, Charlotte, no. Just age.
a superhero from
Sorry.
yesteryear,
Okay.
shall we say.
There is a song, Flash. No,
Yeah, I've
Queen.
heard that.
Okay,
Yeah,
good,
okay.
Okay, good. Well done.
Tune in next week. Look at the subject underneath the headline. Toon's big game hunter strikes again as Dyer United left red-faced. And the reason for that is because he scored this season against Arsenal. He scored against Liverpool. He is a player who's lived up to the hype after going from Everton to Newcastle. He's now scored in 4 home Premier League games in a row. And he rampages down that left side. He has a wonderful, calm composure in the box. And he's forcing his way into the England picture as well, because obviously there are more celebrated names, even though they're similar age to him. But with his consistency and his willingness to really roll up his sleeves, okay, he doesn't have sleeves, but you know what I mean. He is
He
a
needed them
player.
yesterday, to
Well,
be fair.
absolutely, it was quite cold. He's a wonderful footballer, and we're seeing the best of him at the moment. Show you just one more as well. This is the Telegraph. Sorry, the Sunday Times. Forgive me. Ten Hag caught cold as a reference to what you were saying a second ago, Charlotte, but. I just with the focus, because the inside piece does talk a lot about United and their failings as well, and there are many of them, and it's worth pointing out Newcastle's 3 wins in a row against United now, clean sheets in all of them. You have to go back some time for the last time United were victorious over Newcastle over a sustained period, and it's the stat about Manchester United against the top 8. No victory against the top 8 for, I think, a couple of years now. And there's a really good inquest in the Sunday Times all about the problems that Ten Hag has to contend with. Now, the interesting thing about this is that some people say, well, if they win, you're really gushing about them. If they lose, you're hammering them. We had a conversation the other week on here about United's win and the form that they had been in going into this match. They were the in-form team in the Premier League. And you asked me, are you convinced about them? And I was saying to you, still not quite, because every time they step up in class, they're found wanting. They blew a 2-0 and a 3-1 lead against Galatasaray in Turkey, and they've lost again without scoring to Newcastle. And you do wonder how they do arrest this slide, because, as you say, you can't see any leaders in the side. There isn't really cohesion in the side. There is uncertainty throughout, and it was ultimately quite a bloodless victory for Newcastle, who could and should have scored more goals.
Let's stick with the picture, because this man here, Anthony Gordon, is having the time of his life. Is he playing himself into Southgate's thinking, do you feel, for the Euros?
I feel like he's going to be one of those. There's always one before every squad announcement, isn't there, where everyone's banging the drum, saying surely there needs to be in. Obviously, before the World Cup, it was James Maddison, wasn't it? How can you not take him?
Yes.
And then in the end, he ended up going and not playing. I feel like we could end up with a similar situation with Gordon. We know that Southgate likes to go with experience, so he likes to go with the players that he trusts, that he knows, that he's given caps to before. So it would be a bit of a wild card to take him. But if you're going off form, I don't think there's any way that he can be overlooked, especially we've obviously just spoken about Rashford. They play in a similar position down the left. If you looked at that game yesterday, which obviously you can't just take one game in isolation, there's only one player you're taking out of the two of them, and it's not Marcus Rashford. But then, like we were saying before, you've got Phil Foden, Jack Grealish. There's so many different options. So I think it's going to come down to the makeup of the squad in terms of where Southgate sees them all fitting in, and hopefully, well, if he continues in this form, it's going to be hard for Southgate to ignore him.
Yeah, unless he swaps his allegiance to Scotland, of course, but let's not talk about that with our England heads on. Look, the problem for Eddie Howe is this injury list, and it's got worse yesterday. Nick Pope with a shoulder injury, we think, that could keep him out for weeks. It just goes from bad to worse. I think that's something like 13 senior players currently on the sick note list for Newcastle.
I mean, on the one hand, obviously gutted for Pope because he's been such a wonderful last line of defence for Newcastle. He gives that assuredness to his back four, and he's a terrific organiser, shot stopper. And I know sometimes when you talk about goalkeepers being good shot stoppers, people say, well, that's their job. But we've seen one or two high-profile goalkeepers not able to stop shots. So he'll be a big miss for them. Dubravka's no slouch who comes in for him. Yeah. So I certainly don't want to play down his entry into the side, but Pope is a wonderful goalkeeper, and it's to the credit of Newcastle that despite all of these injuries they retain that spirit and belief that is so lacking at Manchester United to be able to keep getting results.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, and the fact that he couldn't even change his starting 11, I think, for the third time in a row. Eddie Howe is managing that situation well, isn't he?